Thank you Warthunder for sponsoring this video. The Scarlet King is the most powerful entity in the world. He was imprisoned by an organization known only as the SCP Foundation. He just escaped and is now plotting to destroy the world in 100 days. I used to be a scientist for the SCP Foundation until a horrible accident left me unrecognizable and imprisoned by the very foundation I once worked for. This is the story how I turned my worst failure into the greatest thing to ever happen to the world. Waking up in what appeared to be a cell, I noticed a note was left for me. It seems that 5 years ago there was a horrible accident in my lab that changed me completely. My partner attempted to save me but was unable to do so, trapping me in containment to prevent me from harming anyone. My new designation is SCP-106 D1NO. I was then informed that I was maybe the only person who could fix the issue that the organization couldn't, as they were unable to successfully trap the SCP-001, otherwise known as the Scarlet King. It is my mission to take him down and capture or destroy the other SCPs he has unleashed on our world, and I was then given the code to my cell along with some clues on how to escape the facility. Hopefully I could end this extinction level event and return to normal. With the knowledge that someone out there wanted me to escape, I left my cell, and exploring the facility I noticed other SCPs were being held captive.
Yeah, boy.
SCPs 4715, 1000, 594, and 999 were all locked up with me. I eventually found the start of a broken down staircase, and I began trying to complete it. Somehow knowing my way out was hidden along the course, and eventually running out of water, I returned to my cell to replenish my thirst. After falling off the parkour course for another time and breaking my ankles, I checked the fridge to find some cooked meat, as this was useful stuff to heal myself from the fall. And once I eventually figured out my abilities as an SCP, I was able to use my climbing claws to skip the parkour course entirely. Finding the notes with parts of the code hidden along the course. Returning to refill on water, I had 3 parts of the code collected and I only needed 1 more. So I climbed up the facility wall to gather it. Using all the notes gathered, I entered the code 8602. And at the door, I opened up and I made my escape. We're getting the heck out of here, boys. Stepping out into the blazing sun as I took my first look at the devastation in front of me. Oh wow, the Scarlet King has destroyed this world. I began gathering berries and fiber from the bushes, as one does once they've escaped prison on a desolate landscape, and exploring outwards I stacked the berries on my hotbar and performed what I like to call Bob's berry trick, consuming all 4 stacks of edible berries to refill my thirst and hunger. The city is overrun. Needing some wood in order to craft some of the basic tools I would need, I found a tree that looked safe to punch, so off I went, only to be stopped in my tracks as SCP-682 and 4715 were in a battle right in my path. Oh, the city's at war. You have to knock them off. But now there's a bigger problem. SCP-682, the unkillable croc. Trying my best to avoid the unknown SCP guarding the tree I wanted, I managed to sprint past and make it to the tree, punching it to gather wood and thatch, as I then collected some stone so I could craft a stone pick. Harvesting a nearby boulder for flint, I then made myself a stone hatchet to gather even more wood, and then proceeded to make up a couple of cooking pots for the experience. So after leveling up and boosting my movement speed, I began making myself a little shack to hide away in. Spending the morning of day 3 constructing my little hut, I added a water bucket so I could have myself a permanent water source in the base. I think I need to head back to the facility and see what supplies I can ransack. So after traveling past the SCPs on the walkway, I eventually made it back to the facility. Checking every storage container I could find, I gathered up the resources stored away before heading back home and testing out another one of my SCP abilities. I targeted a PT with my fire breath, but as it flew away, I changed my target to an Archaeopteryx. Some roast Archaeopteryx, anyone? After harvesting the roasted creature and even melting a second one, I headed home, crafting and placing down a forge to smelt the raw metal I had collected, and now with the forge going, I was able to set up a smithy, which I then used to make myself a metal pickaxe and metal hatchet. So with metal tools in hand, I went off to gather some resources from the nearby rocks and trees. And I was also able to set up a sink, so now I had a steady supply of water to my base. I also set up a bed, so if I inevitably die, I have a respawn point, but I'll probably never use it because there's no way I'm going to die. I even added a rug to my base to make it more comfortable, a nice change from the cell I'd been caged in for the past 5 years. And I made myself a crossbow and some arrows in the morning of day 4. Placed down a mortar and pestle as well as the Trank++ mortar and pestle, as being able to combine narcotics for multiplied versions, as some of the SCPs I was going to have to go after would have a massive torpor pool. I made the standard SCP D-class uniform in the hope that if anything would spot me, they would assume I was meant to be out here. And then as the raw meat I had was almost ready to spoil, I decided to split the stack so I could get as much spoiled meat as possible, since I would need truckloads for the amount of narcotics I would be crafting. And I then set out in search of some chitin. Finding a lone Uranium, I began shooting at it, only to be interrupted by a massive SCP brawl happening nearby. But once the spider was killed and harvested, my path was then blocked by SCP-3700-1, so I decided to climb up the nearby pillar to avoid confrontation, returning to base to begin making up a batch of narcotics. And then I woke up in the morning to some massive explosions. It sounded as if a large creature was nearby, so I installed some windows so that I could see what it was. Okay, whatever was over my house seems to have moved. And then as it seemed as the coast was clear, so I headed out and climbed up to the upper level, only to be attacked by a snake-like SCP, causing me to fall to my death. So I made up a small batch of cementing paste, using it to craft myself the tech binos, as using these would allow me to see some useful information on any creatures that I come across. Exiting the house, I noticed SCPs 3700-2 and 3700-1 above my base, and so I decided to test out the binos on them. It says this thing 3700 is a passive tame. So I began running up to the giant blue crab, attempting to feed it some raw meat as I was unable to reach the hitbox, so I made a quick pit stop at home and made a reusable grapple. Then did my best Spider-Man impression as I pulled myself up onto the crab, only to find I couldn't tame it anyways. Leaving SCP-3700 alone for now, I watched as the unkillable Croc was fighting a Megatherium on the ground, and spotting an outpost, I had to wonder if there might be some loot in there for me to claim as my own. I'm gonna go grab a parachute. We're gonna drop down to that outpost. Trust me, sneak our way in there. So quickly making my way back home, I made a reusable parachute. Then once I got back to the ledge, I jumped off and began to glide down towards the outpost. Attaching my grapple to the roof of the outpost, I swung down and landed inside, and that's when I found a cryobed. There's a person sleeping here, mysterious. And noticing the storage box next to the bed, I cracked open the lock and took a peek inside. There was a journal and even some resources. I don't know whoever's going to see this. I've decided to put myself into cryosleep for the duration of this apocalypse. If you think you can do it, I've left some supplies at the power plant. Can't think of where it is, but it's stationed somewhere near a sulfur pit. I guess I had my next target, the power plant, upon arriving back home with the new resources I'd found. And now that I finally had some time to myself in base, I decided to play a bit of the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, Warthunder, today's sponsor. A game where you can take command of over 2,500 tanks, ships and aircraft of 10 major nations, ranging from the 1920s until the main war vehicles of today. Filled with incredibly detailed vehicles, realistic graphics, and incredible sounds, putting you right at the helm of these powerful war machines. With over 95 million players, dive into the breathtaking experience that is Warthunder. They've been a long-time sponsor of the channel, and my Discord has even grown to have a large, tight-knit community of players if you're looking to get involved. They even now have a mobile version, so you can take the battlefield with you wherever you go. The game is also heavily optimized, so you'll get impressive visuals and high frame rates even on lower end machines. And I love that the game is more than just simple boxes with hit points. Warthunder has sophisticated damage modules, as every vehicle is intricately modeled down to its individual components. The game is free to play on PC, consoles, and mobile devices. So make sure you download Warthunder right now with my links in the video description, as using my link will get you a massive bonus pack if you're a new or returning player. This pack comes with multiple premium vehicles, an exclusive vehicle decorator, and 7 days of premium account. Thank you Warthunder for sponsoring. They've been such a major support for the channel, so I hope you check them out, and let's get back to the video. I made myself a set of flak armor and a batch of purple narcotics, which were 50 times as strong as normal ones. And then it was the start of day 6, and as I was meddling around the base when I spotted a strange skeleton looking SCP. You'll eat raw meat? So scanning SCP-250 using my binos. Now in order to tame it, I shot it with a trank arrow that had no effect as it didn't even wake up. So instead I decided to tame its little partner nearby, SCP-999. I continued to passively tame SCP-999, feeding it measure berries from my pocket, and it only took a couple of berries, but once done, he was my first ever friend. After naming him Tickle Monster, I picked him up. Oh, he's cute. He sits on your shoulder and he gives you friendly auras. You are weird. And I may not know it yet, but Tickle Monster may end up being exactly the edge I need to defeat the Scarlet King. And I don't think the SCP Foundation knew about him. So leaving SCP-250 behind, I looked over the edge to see what was down below. That is a big snake. That is a very big snake. I want to see some of the SCP-939's escape containment. And there's 3700 too. Returning back to base, I saw all the flying creatures suddenly fall to the ground. What just happened? And that's when I was attacked by a mini lightning wyvern creature. So I was having an archer decide to try and fight me. So using my fire breath, I set it on fire, burning it down, and continuing to explore, I was crossing the bridge when out of nowhere, a massive SCP spawned directly in front of me. Where do you come from? What are you? Oh my god. So leaving SCP-126 alone, I continued to explore where I found an Explorant which gave me an experience boost. And that's when I spotted SCP-1000. He must be what all the Bigfoot rumors originated from. And then getting tired of walking, as I must already be at like 50,000 steps, I decided to knock out a tapiara. Feeding it raw meat, I used Tickle Monster's aura to speed up the taming process, and once awake I named it Tapioca. Now to lead him home where I could make a saddle, but I never expected to see one of the Ark's most powerful SCPs waiting for me. Oh. Bro, why are you gonna be on my house? SCP-2317-K-2. A literal boss theorized to be related to the Scarlet King was right outside my house. I knew I had to lead it away, so swapping to my stone arrows as I began drawing it towards the edge, eventually forcing it to walk off and fall down into the city below. Not my problem now, as the people dumb enough to live on the city floor can handle it. Finding another SCP-999, I decided to name him Tickles. Making sure that my Tickle Monster Tickles and Tapioca made it safely back to base, I headed inside to craft up some soul balls, and then after looking around I noticed Tickles was missing. Oh, Tickles has fallen down there. Leaving Tickles to fend for himself, as I was then attacked by SCP-1013, as with just a single attack it broke my D-class armor. I did a bit to save the scary monsters. But as I was hiding under the bed, the fire breath from the SCP cooked me, killing me in the process. I really wish I had my SPF 3000 sun cream. Respawning on a new day after an uncomfortable night's sleep due to a warm pillow, I started off the morning by crafting a saddle for Tapioca. After tossing him out, boosting his levels into weight and stamina, we took flight, and simply exploring the city and taking in the surrounding areas. Landing to regenerate some stamina, I then tossed up Tickle Monster to join in on the fun. I also just wanted to use him for his healing aura. Journal mentioned being close to a sulfur pit. Those look like sulfur pits. So exiting the city as we flew around to the sulfur pits. However, after spending a decent amount of time searching and looking around, I I could not find the power plant. And heading back into the city limits, I entered nearby Greenhob. And then as I searched around, I actually found a 4x Explorer note. So I then decided to take the opportunity to level up by crafting a bunch of chibis and killing some weak creatures in the area. Spotting SCP-3934, who is basically the reason all the Loch Ness Monsters rumors exist, and I could see it was classed as a safe creature, so I decided to tame it, naming it Nessie upon completion and boiling it up with a soul ball as I then continued to fly around on Tapioca. Finding SCP-16 veins, I tried to destroy them on Nessie, with them having 50,000 health that would have taken for it. So deciding to leave the SCP-610 veins for now, I returned Nessie to her Nintendo patent-breaking Pokeball and decided to spend the rest of the day collecting narco berries, as I knew I'd need a lot of them if I were to tame the biggest and baddest SCPs. While gathering, I noticed some damage numbers below, and I then remembered that Tickles was down below, so I made the decision to try and save him. Tickles is just casually tanking a boss like it's nothing. After a risky risk of leading Tickles away from the SCP mini-boss, I balled him up before heading back to base. And after making up some narcotics, I then tossed out Tickles and we spent the rest of the day collecting narco berries together. Having collected a buttload of narco berries, I made up my biggest batch of narcotics yet. I spent the day simply expanding my little house, knowing later on that once I start taming some of the more dangerous SCPs, I would need to make a more secure facility so that I could keep them contained. For now though, in order to keep myself out of a bird's eye view, I carried on with my day building up walls and making my base a little bit cozier. After being locked up in a prison cell for so long, I could finally give myself some luxuries. Having a look at my engrams, I noticed a recipe for a meat spoiler, and knowing that would be a huge help, I wanted to make it, but I was short some cementing paste. So quickly heading out to grab some stone, I used it to create the paste I needed, ending the day by adding a roof to my now larger house. Starting off the day while waiting for some meat to spoil, I simply went out to gather narco berries, replenishing my narcotic stocks as I was using them for trank arrows, and then preparing to go out and tame some new SCPs. I tossed out Tapioca, but before I left, I decided to gather up some stone to make some dino gates, a tried and true trap for the majority of the creatures I would come across. After gathering the resources, I made up the gates, and even used some of the metal I plundered from the prison to make up some bear traps. And heading out on Tapioca, I quickly found SCP-093, otherwise known as the Unclean One. Once humans, these SCPs were actually exposed to a divine substance known as Lord's Tears, which mutated them into these hostile, monstrous creatures. So setting up my gate trap, I realized I'd forgotten my tranks back at base, so after quickly heading home, grabbing my arrows and returning, I began tranking out the SCP. Asleep, I shoved my meat inside and waited for it to tame up, and then Meatface was tamed. And after testing him out, I noticed that it gathered wood. So boiling him up, I continued to explore in Tapioca for more SCPs to add to my team. And then heading down to the ground level of the city, I watched as a couple R2-D2s, as if you watched my Primal Pain video, you'll know the reference, died to some Mankeys. So harvesting the droidicas, collecting the much needed oil, I headed home. Upon arriving and storing up the resources, I made myself a cooker to, well, cook up some meat. And after setting up a bunch of meat to cook, I made myself a soul gun to boil up my creatures from a distance. Heading back out on Tapioca, we landed on an upper platform, and that's when I spotted her. A high level mate for Tapioca. So knocking her out, I went out to find some easy creature to kill in order to get the meat needed to tame her. And while fighting Megalosaurus, some flying ants decided to sacrifice themselves for my benefit. So returning with some fresh raw meat, I fed the female, and after she was all tamed up, named her Pudding. Boiling the new lovebirds up, I headed back to base where I tossed them out and set them to have some lovey-dovey time. Collecting the egg, I set out to make up some air conditioners to assist in incubating it, and then making the fabricator and generator, I set out on Meatface. While heading out, I decided to fight the SCP-173. However, after taking a little too much damage, I simply hopped over a cap and sent it falling to the ground. You see, SCP-173 being a humanoid sculpture painted blue, it's aggressive and will always attack, so stay away unless you're prepared. Not too far from where I sent it flying off the platform, I found a box. This was no normal box, however. It was in fact another SCP, SCP-1762. And what appears to be an average box, however, it spawns these hordes of mini dragons that could easily kill you if you're not paying attention. So doing exactly that, I hopped back on Meatface and defended myself, and that's when the droid gets attacked. So clearing them out, I then focused on taking out the SCP-079 Overseer. And this SCP is exactly that. It's an SCP that presents itself as the Overseer from the island, commanding the hordes of SCP-079 droids to attack you. While fighting the Overseer, the fight was interrupted by a large sauropod, and this was in fact SCP-2256. Aptly named Longneck, as it appears as a member of the Brachiosaurus family. It also seems to emit this radiation sickness that you always see of me being infected by. So killing the Overseer, I jumped down from the platform and almost got Meatface killed due to fall damage, but luckily Tickle Monster is just the critter for his job, as his aura healing Meatface up while I scanned to find the source of the nearby roaring, and finding SCP-147-A nearby. I mean, it looks like a Megatherium with a skeletal face and an emo haircut. But seeing as it was a passive tame, I hopped off Meatface and began feeding it some prime meat. But as I approached it, didn't attack it. It beat so Meatface slapped it once to tell it to knock it off. So finishing feeding the SCP, I named it Sid as it reminded me of a sloth. Yes, that's an Ice Age reference. Mounting Sid, I took him on a little test ride. Oh yes, a berry gatherer. Sid, you're gonna be amazing. You're a berry gatherer. That's fantastic. Get in the ball. You're coming home with me. Bringing Sid back home, I did a little berry gathering outside my hut, stocking up on all of the berries, and then pumping some levels into Sid as I heard the creepiest of laughs. That's not freaky at all. So continuing to stock up on narcotics, I spent the rest of the day simply spoiling some more raw meat. And day 14 started off with refueling the generator, learning and crafting some aircon so I could finally hatch the tappy eggs, and once again I hopped on Sid and headed out for a quick berry run, and once the run was done, I spotted the SCP-250 chilling nearby. We had seen him before. It's the reanimated skeleton of an Allosaurus. So not wanting any unwelcome visitors right outside my base, I decided to kill it with Sid, and harvesting the corpses I gained some dino bones and salt. Parking Sid, I mounted Tapioca and headed out to explore more of the city. Eventually finding another SCP-3700, I checked it out with my bonus and seeing that I was now over level 90, I set out to find some weak creatures I could kill to gather meat to try to tame this giant crab. Finding some Titanobos, I killed and harvested them with Tapioca, before heading back and grappling up to tame 3700-1. Once I convinced her to join my team, I named her Mrs. Krabs, and after testing her out for a bit, I watched her, she did a little dance when I leveled her up, and she was actually insane. So with Mrs. Crab on my side, I decided to try and take on SCP-173. But the fight taking longer than I wanted, I simply let it off the platform once again and headed home. And bringing in the Hall of Wood, I learned the platform saddle, but I couldn't craft it as I didn't have the resources yet. I did, however, make up a saddle for Sid, and equipping it, I balled him up and headed back out into the world. And now that I had a couple of SCPs converted to my side, I decided to go see if I could find that facility that Mysterios had written about. So off I flew in search of the sulfur pit I'd seen a couple days ago. Flying through the wastelands as I passed a little too close to a giant space whale. How mad at me are you? You are. So fleeing from the spawn of SCP-682's minions, I quickly pulled a maneuver inspired from Top Gun, U-turning as I sent most of the flock ahead, while only 2 were left on my tail, weaving in and out of the city structures until I finally lost the final pursuing 682s. Okay, I think I lost it. And heading outside the city limits, I headed out into the sulfur pits, searching for the power plant and landed for stamina when Tapioca got stunned by an SCP's attack, sending him off of the saddle. So rushing to remount my escape to continue searching for the facility. Landing randomly on a platform for stamina, and that's when I noticed that I had found what looked to be the power plant. I think that is the facility. Opening the doors to the facility as I noticed that it was overrun by a pack of SCP-939. These are eyeless, blood-colored flesh monsters, kind of similar to a wild pack of coyotes. So to avoid dealing with the pack on foot, I simply flew Tapioca inside and up the elevator shaft. Finding the armory, I looted the vault, finding some armor and weapons inside. Oh, don't mind if I do. This should help me clear out all these nasties down here. So flying to the elevator platform, I stalled it just out of reach of the 939s and began clearing them out. Not even the baby was safe, as I didn't know what to expect, so everything had to die. Harvesting the corpses as I actually gained human flesh. Yuck. And then once the ground level was clear, I returned to the second floor and began searching, eventually finding a journal as I read through it. This is confidential. Please refrain from reading further. In the most dangerous zone there is, we have a laboratory where we study anomalies like the SCPs to develop strategies against them. Currently it has been abandoned due to dangerous conditions. Enter at your own risk. Now, if only I knew where the most dangerous zone was. Then seeing as one of the mannequins had gear on, I destroyed it, and picking through the scraps I collected all the ammo stored within. Hopping on Tapioca, we left the power plant, and landing outside as I practiced my aim by shooting down the corrupted PT that aggroed onto me. Harvesting it for its corrupted nodules, a replacement for polymer. And now that I knew my mission was going to be dangerous, I decided that I was going to need to build up an army. And once I had my army, I could go scout the lab and hopefully inside it tell the whereabouts of the Scarlet King. So I spent day 16 flying around scouting out potential base locations, channeling my inner pigeon as I flew directly into a window. And heading back to base, I tested out my new guns I'd gathered. Got a blicky. Oh my god. And firing wildly, the Glock 45 handgun I got was fully automatic. So learning the engrams for my bench and tools to maintain my weapons, I made myself a billboard, and on it was my to-do list. Find a metal and stone gatherer, find a new base location, and build proper base in said base location, and start taming more SCPs to build up my forces. And I then spent the rest of the day simply playing with my Glock, testing out the damage before returning home to place down the MRRAP tools smithy. Waking up on day 18, the foundation of my base was shaking wildly, and exiting, I noticed an overseer was directly outside of my base. Opening the RTBs and orders, I knocked off the overseer, leaving that problem for the creatures below to deal with. Being jumped by an SCP-4975 was not on my morning bingo card. So after panic firing, I took in the SCP's appearance, a bipedal creature, and it kind of looked like a Therizino with its claws all fused together. So I headed out to explore, and all of a sudden SCP-4715 got angry at me. Now this SCP was actually in fact a minor boss, and looking like an evolved ferox with red horns erupting from its skull. And then as I was scanning the area, I spotted SCP-323. Now, this SCP is the result of a creature wearing SCP-323, more commonly known as the Wendigo Skull. And then as I was checking out, 4715 leapt up to the platform I was on. So I did what any sane creature would do, and I hardtailed it out of there. Eventually, gaining my composure, I decided that no, I was not going to let this big creature scare me away. F you, I'll shoot you with my blicky. I got the golden camo, bro. Don't mess with me. And then getting the SCP stuck to the point, I could rain down freedom seeds from above. I even swapped to my rifle to deal some more damage, but eventually running out of ammo, I decided to ask out Mrs. Krabs. Let's grab Mrs. Krabs. Doesn't have a saddle, but she's got a lot of health. So bonking SCP-4715 on the head numerous times, it was nearly dead when it decided to jump off of the cliff. No! So taking aim with my golden gun, I managed the kill shots of tossing out Tapioca, flew down to the corpse. What's battle for the ages? 682 versus 3700. And another 4715 and another 682. Oh my god, this place is a war zone! And now it's time for the Natural Causes Picking a Base Spot segment. Starting out with Location A. Benefits include it has a lot of area space. It's got a sky deck you could build on top of if you wanted to make a location for your flyers, and it has only 2 walkways in, so it's only 2 areas you need to block off. But downsides include the fact that there is a hole in the floor and it is currently inhabited by a deadly statue that would snap your neck if given the opportunity. Named the Twin Pit Palace, owned for the simple, cheap cost of 300,000 Dijabouchon francs. It is easily defendable, ample building space, and downside, giant fucking holes in the center. So all in all, this location, I give it a solid 6 out of 10. On to location B. This I call High Rise Waterfall. With a simple cost of only 2,500 wood and 2,500 stone, the benefits include it being high above the ground, so no land-based critters can simply walk in. Easy access bushes and trees for resource gathering, and even having a natural pool for when you need to simply cool off. However, the downsides are that if you don't have a flyer to reach up here, you're screwed. Stone and metal would have to be brought up from elsewhere, and finally one wrong step and you're plummeting to your death. All in all, I give this location a 4 out of 10. And next, location C, or better named Central Executive Ramp. With a steep selling point of your dog's favorite chew toy, the benefits include ample room for building up your base, easy access to locations anywhere within the city, resources are nearby, but the downsides are that it is currently being occupied by a slew of SCPs. Oh, we can no longer check out this spot anymore. The SCP-682 has decided it's not for sale. And apparently there was already an offer on location number 3. This SCP-682 did not like me nosing around and decided to scare me off of the location. On to location D. Now this lovely location I call Edge of the World Lofts. With a price point of 3 million Mexican pesos, the benefits include only 2 entrances you'd have to block off, a beautiful garden overlooking the carnage brought to you by the SCPs living down below, and resources readily available including wood, stone, and everything gatherable from bushes. Now the downside to this location, it has a rather low ceiling that would probably get in the way of some of the larger SCPs. But all in all, I give this location a 7 out of 10. Next up, we have location E. What I like to call it, Sky High Condo. Coming with multiple levels so you can choose how to make your base high above the ground. You need a flyer to gain access, but unfortunately there's no readily accessible resources, so you'd have to go out and transport them from elsewhere. With a limited area to store your creatures and a steep cost of my first grandchild, I give this area a 3 out of 10. Welcome to base location F, or more aptly named Hidden Wasteland Oasis. It spans a massive cave with only 3 entrances, even comes with a flyer dock where you can store your, well, flyers. Ample resources spawn within the cave, and it even has an elevated position you can build your living space on, having your creatures down below, but the downside is near the wasteland, so your food and thirst will drop quickly. All in all, I give this place a 9 out of 10, and even with the high price point of the promise of my firstborn child hand in marriage, I think this is where we will be making our base today. Before I'd be able to move everything to my new chosen base location though, I knew I was going to need, or at least want, the platform saddle for 3700. So I set off to the desert dome where I thought would be my best bet at getting angler gel. So heading towards the desert, I ran out of stamina as one does, landed in the clutches of a multitude of SCPs, so quickly boiling up tapioca as I parachuted away for safety. Once far enough away, I spotted SCP-3602, just a small little monkey SCP. It's classed as safe, so I tossed out tapioca and spent the rest of the day in the wasteland searching for corrupted creatures to take out. But with how dangerous a wasteland is, I just didn't feel safe at any point landing to try and kill a corrupted. Eventually getting attacked by a wild SCP, I flew out of its range. Go away, banana ring. The banana. Run away from the banana. As I woke up, planning to move today, my entire house was shaking. So heading out to see who so rudely interrupted my beauty sleep, I was presented by SCP-079 in its gorilla form. So quickly leaping off the platform and pulling my parachute, I led the giant digital monkey off of my base area and grappling back to resume my plans of moving. Tossing out Mrs. Krabs, she was to be my pack mule. So I began dismantling my starter base, picking up everything and tossing it into her inventory. Then mounting her, we began our journey with literally everything I owned inside of a single creature. This was incredibly nerve-wracking, because if I ran into anything too powerful for Mrs. Krabs to take on, I would lose literally everything I owned. So seeing a 682 overhead made me incredibly nervous. However, fortune today was on my side, as it did not seem to care about me at the moment, as it had other creatures it preferred to attack. During the journey, I made sure to take out a herd of corrupted stegos for the corrupt nodules, and then eventually arriving at the Wasteland Oasis Cave, I parked Mrs. Krabs and began the tedious task of building my base. So you know what that means? Building montage! After such a massive building spree, I decided to finish off my day by resting in the tub. You know, the scales get a bit dry over an extended period, so it's good to rest and relax a little. And also, my forearms are tiny, but my biceps are jacked. As I was sleeping off the massive base build I had just decided was good enough for now, something outside decided a literal earthquake would be a good alarm clock. So I hopped onto Mrs. Krabs to check out who decided to disturb my beauty sleep. Reaching the area above my little cave, I hopped into the battle between a 079 dragon and a 173. Killing the dragon, some R2-D2s and a swarm of the box SCP's mini dragon minions, I then set my sights on fighting Blinky, but damn, he was tough. So I chose to focus something weaker. Spotting the Overseer, I went to take that out instead, all the while leading Blinky into a structure where I lost him inside. Returning to base, I tossed out Sid and spent the rest of the day farming for berries and making stonks of narcotics. And returning from the burial, I was attacked by a 682's dragon summon. So after killing it, I went to work making myself a little drug making room. Time to get a Heisenberg up in here to make some drugs. After crafting up a transfer tool and setting up some crop plots, I put some of my creatures into the soul terminal to start producing me some poop I could then use as fertilizer. Adding a sink onto the crop plots for irrigation, I now had my own personal source of narco berries. And after checking what all I needed to craft Mrs. Krabs her platform saddle, I was still a ways off from making it, and needing a bunch of resources, I decided to take her out, and upon exiting the cave, I started fighting a 610 vein. So after sitting there smashing down with Mrs. Krabs' big meaty claws, I finally destroyed the vein, and to my surprise, nothing came of it.
You get nothing!
So disappointed, I headed off to the snow dome. Oh my god, don't touch me, big boy! Careful to avoid the giant SCP that appeared as I got close, my vision began going funky once I entered the snow dome. So I sought out and killed the big radioactive brachie to clear my vision, and I made sure as I was exploring the snow dome, I would take out any 2256 I came across, as the vision impairment was starting to get old. And while I was exploring, I got swarmed by some juvenile 1013s, and from what I could see, they were humanoid-like creatures with heads like a bird. But seeing as they were disturbing Mrs. Krabs, we took them out, and then taking out yet another radioactive Bronto, I crested the mountain and found myself in the center of a massive brawl. Oh, I don't want to be in the middle of this. 1,000 damage! Run! Running away from what I could only guess would be my certain demise, I ran directly into an unkillable croc. Oh, go the other way. So naturally, I turned my big blue crab girl around and skittered away. Finding a flock of 682 dragons fighting some corrupted creatures, I took the whole lot out before returning to base, and seeing that a Blinky had infiltrated my sanctuary, I led it up to my flight deck and yeeted him off of the edge. Bye, shorty. Making me Blinky, bastard. After removing Blinky from the interior of my cave, I was getting fed up with the constant blinking effect, so I spent the morning thinking of a way to deal with him. I thought about surrounding it with metal barbed wire fences, but ultimately just led it further into the wasteland, spending the day simply making more narcotics, even converting what I had into red narcotics, which were 200 times as potent as normal ones. Ending the day smelting heaps of metal into usable ingots, I am making a compound bow as the metal arrows are a lot stronger than the stone, so they'll be able to pierce the hard scales of the stronger SCPs so that I can deal more torpor. And after I had enough metal smelted down, I was finally able to piece together a compound bow. After seeing a 682 outside my cave entrance, I quickly crafted up some metal trank arrows, and using the red narcotics, I was all set to go and tame something. Luckily for me, the answer to the question of what I would tame showed up through the sewer. A 4715 had made its way into my base, so grappling to the ceiling, I lured it further in, but not before it launched a boulder hitting me square in the face. But after 7 arrows aimed perfectly, the beast went to sleep. Feasting on some raw prime meat thanks to Mrs. Krabs, she was all tamed up, so naming her Stitch, I mounted and off we went on her maiden voyage, running through the wasteland as we found ourselves heading into the desert dome. Making our way through the desert, I found myself staring at the entrance of the artifact cave, and knowing that the only way to make the Scarlet King show himself was to collect the 3 artifacts, I ran through the cave, taking out the Arthroplura dwelling inside, and I even looted a red drop collecting a Mastercraft Theory saddle. And finally making my way to the artifact, I scooped it up, and the artifact of the chaos now in my possession should make the Scarlet King aware of what I was doing. So exiting the cave, I had some followers that I had to take care of, and once I did so I spotted the man, the myth, the legend, Bigfoot. Helping it kill an unclean one as I harvested the corpse for raw materials before deciding to knock Bigfoot out. I don't actually have wine and nonsense, so having it doesn't work. And not one to let sleepy things lay. I killed the Bigfoot before continuing to explore the desert. Spotting a 953 near the edge of the dome, I decided I wanted to tame it, and seeing it liked human flesh, I began fighting an Alpha 939, and after a long battle with Stitch, I harvested its corpse for the human flesh. And now, the next few days of my VODs got corrupted after recording, so here's a rundown of what actually happened. I knocked out and tamed the 953, a 9-tailed fox, balled it up and headed home, and then spent the next few days just resource collecting. And waking up on day 41, I wanted to show off my new creature, SCP-953, which I had named Foxy Tails. So taking her out in the wastelands, killing off creatures to level her up, we made our way into the desert biome, and running around a bit, I scanned an SCP-594, or the electrified Ovis, but leaving it be for now. I saw another 3602, and after fighting and killing 2761 for its banana chunks to tame it, I just couldn't find the little monkey again. So instead, I continued searching and found a new SCP, SCP-745, better known as Headlights, a bipedal creature whose brain is visible yet wrapped in a web of bioluminescent organs below the skin. So knocking it out, I waited for it to tame up, and once it woke up, I named it Egghead cause, well, its head looks like an egg. So balling up Foxy Tails, I continued to explore the desert biome on Egghead, and making my escape from a second 745 as I wandered into the wasteland where I began fighting off a couple of Brontos. Once the Brontos were killed, I ran around the wasteland on Egghead, even making my way to an underground entrance. But unsure of what terrors I would find, I decided not to take my chances and return to the wasteland. Testing out Egghead's damage on a 610 vein, I decided it just wasn't worth my time, and upon leaving the vein, I ran into a boulder tossed by a 3456. So making my way back to base, I had to lure away another 173 before being able to enter safely. And now that the 173 was safely lured away, I began cooking up some food, even making myself an icebox to keep my perishables fresh for longer, storing those banana chunks in the icebox, and then I took Stitch out fighting the 2256 that was messing up my vision, and we killed it with ease. And nearby, I saw that an SCP-2662, which looks like a large human with squid-like tentacles on his back, was fighting an SCP-079 arachnid version. So like a good neighbor, I rushed over to assist to taking out the 2662 before turning my attention to the digital broodmother, taking it out as well. Heading home, I parked Stitch in the ground level before ending off the day, and I then spent the next few days simply setting up my farm on top of the roof, adding irrigation and compost bins for fertilizer, and even taking out another 2256. And as I was resting from the few days of gardening, I was having some wonderful dreams about playing games with my two best friends, Chromida and Chaotic, over on The Nest, our friend group channel where the three of us play random games, go on crazy adventures, And like our most recent project where we tried to take on Powerworld's 7 towers with spinwheel decided elements and randomly generated powers scattered across the map. So if you want to check it out, a link to the channel will be in the description. Anyways, back to the video. And seeing another 4715 chilling in the sewer tunnel. I balled up Foxy Tail so she wouldn't just die, and then luring the SCP out of the tunnel went full Leroy Jenkins and yeeted itself down the cliffside below. So using some top tier skills I've learned, I knocked out the SCP after it killed a corrupted Giga, and as I was trying to knock it out, some R2-D2s and even a Carno came to attack me. Luckily, I was able to lure the Carno down the steps, and then returning to my sleeping 4715. I fed it, and then when it tamed up, it was angry. So it killed the R2-D2s, disturbing its sleep. So tossing out Foxy Tails together with my new 4715, we began fighting Blinky Boy. During the battle, a random Bananazilla thought it was a good idea to get involved, so obviously we killed it too. And as I wasn't doing much damage on Foxy Tails, I headed back to base, grabbed Stitch and hopped on Mrs. Krabs, and returning to the 173 as I tossed Stitch out for the mate boost and named the male angel. Together with Mrs. Krabs, we got to exploring a ragtag trio of destruction. We fought off another 4715, leading into an Overseer and R2-D2s before the wild 4715 leapt down into the ravine below. But not letting it get away that easily, of course I followed, and after what seemed like forever, we finally managed to kill it, gaining some flesh that hates an element, and I even killed a herd of 3, 4, 5, 6 creepy horse-like creatures that had human torsos connected to them, kind of like a deranged centaur. Oh sh**. I wasn't expecting to find SCP 3700-2 now, but we ball! But the fight was tough. It was doing so much damage. So unable to take out the 3700-2, I balled up Stitch and Angel and took Mrs. Krabs back home. Whoa. Oh, my wall's been broken through. So clearing the structures that are damaging my walls, I simply parked Mrs. Krabs and rested up, and then restocking on red tranks. I was about to leave when I saw that a Blinky Boy was trapped under the debris inside my base. So after getting it unstuck by placing some barbed wire fences on it, I tossed out Angel and Stitch and got to work whittling down its health, fighting for what felt like days until Mrs. Krabs finally got the killing blow on the 173. So heading out on Stitch, we traveled through the Wasteland, spotting another SCP-1000, and I still didn't have or even know where to get Substance Y909, so I left it alone, setting off to where I dropped into what appeared to be a sunken forest. I don't know what danger lies down here, but I could sense it. One of the Scarlet King's artifacts were down here and I just had to find it, spending the entirety of day 50 searching for the entrance to the cave that held the Scarlet King's artifact. While running around the sunken forest, searching for the cave that held the artifact, I continued to search around, even finding new potential friends like this giant robotic fish, and scanning it, I learned it was SCP-1128. Not wanting to do anything with it right now, I continued to search, and after what felt like days running around in circles, I had found the entrance. Running through the cave, I took out some of its inhabitants, collected myself some drops before ultimately claiming the prize I came here for, the artifact Growth. Of course, I couldn't have just grabbed it and left peacefully. I had to fight my way out. So making my way to the exit of the cave as I started the journey back home. Ascending from the sunken forest, I paused my trip to scan an enhanced enforcer, and leaving it behind as I began jumping through the wasteland, and that's when I found yet another Euclid class that interested me, the enhanced Tech Strider. However, when I hopped off of Stitch to attempt to tame it, it just poofed out of existence. Fine, doesn't want you anyway. So making my way home, I crafted a pedestal and placed the artifact of growth down, and hopping onto Angel, I headed for the Snow Dome. Having 2 of the 3 artifacts, I assumed the last one was hidden there, and after running through the snow biome, I had no luck in finding the final artifact. I did, however, spot a 5-9, literally just a half cat chilling in the snow, and climbing the largest mountain, I did collect an explorer note allowing me to level Angel even further. then eventually deciding to leave the snow for now. I exited the dome only to come face to face with a massive SCP-169. Avoiding a fight I did not want to have right now, I continued to explore, scanning an SCP-2662, checking its taming food. I stopped and watched as a Mega 250 fought against a 096 for a while. So I decided to head back to the sunken forest, but as I arrived to the drop, I wasn't alone. Oh, hello friend. A 2317 wanted to join along in the free fall, so down we went. Leaving it behind, however, I ran around searching for the 2662 I saw while searching for the cave, and finding it being attacked by headlights, I simply knocked it out, allowing the giant squid monster to kill it. And knowing it looked like cooked prime meat, I made up some campfires and began grilling. Starting the taming process, I snuck up behind it and fed it before realizing it was in fact just a chill guy. Although if I remember a fun fact about this SCP in particular, isn't this the one that broke into the SCP facility just so that he could play video games with the scientists there? And then waiting for the 2662 to get hungry again. I went AFK for a bit and eventually died to a theory, so I guess that was a mistake. So after respawning, I hopped on Stitch and rushed back to save Tickles. And then once I got back and dealt with the theory, I continued waiting for Mr. Squidman to get hungry again, and that's when a 3456 showed up. So I decided to knock it out and tame it up as well, giving it the very apt name of Glueman. And running around and testing out Glueman, I wasted more time waiting for 2662 to be ready to eat again. And then finally the big squid was ready to eat, so I began feeding it. He's like basically my father. Like, we got the same skin. Maybe that's why he's chill with me. He's like my son, he's back. And then as it tamed up, I gave him the proper name of Daddy, before mounting and testing it out. After hanging with my dad for a while, I stuffed him into a soul ball and tossed out the tappy jar, and flew out of the forest, swapping back to Stitch upon reaching the top. And heading through the wastelands, I spotted a 2761 all alone. So knocking it out, I went to feed it, but realized when I approached it, it was a passive tame. So instead, I just killed it and continued home. And tossing out my new friends upon arriving, leaving once again on Stitch, I soon came into contact with SCP-722. Whoa, big snake. But getting dismounted somehow, I simply knocked out the giant snake before dying to SCP-173. So I respawned, grabbed a Tapihara and flew to the snake, and then mounting Angel, I had to run away in order to deal with the corrupted Parasaur before I could pick up Tickles and tame the snake. Then returning to base after the giant nope rope was secured, I tossed out the snake and tested it out. It was a little bit awkward to use due to its size, so I parked it at base and named it Earthworm. And then repairing my gear, I decided to set out in search of the lab, remembering the clue stating that it was in the most dangerous area, and now having been living here for a while, I had a hunch on just where exactly that might be. So returning through the wasteland, got a little bit too close to a 2317 and getting yeeted by it, and so I quickly dismounted before it sent me flying across the border. As if I had gone past, I would have instantly died and lost Angel. So continuing to run through the wasteland, I eventually made it to the area I assumed the lab was in. Whoa, what is that? And finding in this area that it was absolutely infested with SCP-610s. So I began killing them, harvesting the corpses and gaining lots of flesh that hates. I think this must be it. And the entrance to this area was littered with 610 veins. I knew inside this area the lab has to be somewhere. The Scarlet King has clearly made this area his domain. So traveling through this desolate land, I spotted some structures tucked up into the terrain. I think that might be the lab up there. I just got to deal with these guys first. So after clearing the 610s, I hopped onto my tappy and began to fly, only to be quickly shot by the lab's defenses, so I knew I was gonna have to return with some explosives. Retreating, I simply headed home, where upon arriving I made myself a reformed 610 Xenofem summoner, spawning in my own Reaper female 610 as I took her for a test ride. She was strong, with the added bonus of taking reduced damage, so I gave her the name Pocket Rocket, and thinking I could jump up, press the spacebar, but instead of jumping, she dug into the ground. So note to self, don't do that. So I ended off the day by simply resting in my bed. I thought I'd left the earthquakes behind when I moved into this cave. So I hopped down to see my creatures going crazy because one of the skeletal wyverns had flown in. After dealing with it, I bought a pocket rocket and headed back to the Scarlet King's den with Stitch, and knowing that these reformed 610s were probably my best bet at taking out the Scarlet King, I spent a few days simply farming for flesh that hates, and I took out so many that Angel's inventory was chock full of the stuff. And I then headed home where I took out another 2256 to keep my vision clear. So I went into base to make another 610 only to find I was short of some element. So back out I went to go find some and I tried to defend an element vein and eventually killed one of those digital spiders before leaving the vein behind. And running around the wasteland I spotted some new creatures called jawhounds. And as I returned to the city I found myself at a terminal where I realized I could just craft some element from dust. So after learning the engrams, I rushed back to base to grab all the dust I had collected so far. After returning to the city, I crafted up as much element as I could. And then once the element was done crafting, I returned to base and made up another 610 Xenofam, calling her Rocket Pocket. Headed back to the lab, and then clearing the area below of creatures, I hopped onto my Tapihara and flew up, only to get shot at again by the turrets as my Tapihara died. But thinking quickly, I tossed out Pocket Rocket to soak some of the ammo, but watching as her health was dropping, I swapped her out for Rocket Pocket, but unfortunately I was a little bit too slow at boiling up RP up, and she died to the turret's onslaught. I must have slipped or something, and then a turret got a lucky shot at me, launching me into the lab, and yeah, I got shot by every single turret in there, killing me almost instantly. So respawning at base, I crafted up an RPG and some ammo, and then repairing my gear before hopping on Angel and heading back to the lab. I tried just climbing up to the lab but got shot down once again. So respawning and returning, I checked the trial log to see that Tickle's had starved. So time after time as I tried to get into the lab, and time after time my attempts were thwarted by the damn turrets. Eventually, finally having an idea, I managed to grapple to the underside of the lab, and using my RPG as I shot a hole in the floor, even taking out a turret in the process. And I knew I needed more rockets, so I simply left the lab and returned to base. And on the way, I spotted a new 999 in the Wasteland, but then as I was taming it, a dire bear came out of nowhere and attacked Angel, causing her to kill it and the 999. So I simply went into the city and began searching for a new 999 to tame. Taking some time to try and tame a 1762, however, just didn't want to be my friend. And then eventually finding another 999, but apparently everything under the sun wanted to come and play. And I spent so long keeping the little squishy boy safe, killing off a multitude of SCPs, that when I was done, it was hungry enough for me to simply tame. Naming a ticklish, I picked him up and headed home, and making up more rockets as I hopped on Angel and made my way back to the lab, clearing the creatures under it once again as I flew pudding into the hole, and I then began blasting my way through the lab with rocket after rocket, creating a hole into the interior as I hid behind a tech bed to cause the turret to waste its ammo. But then thinking the turret is out of ammo, I poked my head out only to have it blasted off once again. This happened not once, but twice. Respawning, I found a 3602 chilling near my base, so after taming it and naming it Monka, I headed back to the lab. Picking up Ticklish, I angled myself just right to cause the turret to waste its ammo before I tried to venture deeper into the lab. As I was Spider-Manning over the hallway, the turret fired, sending me back to the respawn screen, so I simply ended the day with repairing my gear and licking my wounds. Waking up after recovering from the many deaths at the lab, I checked my tribe log only to see that not only did Ticklish die back at the lab, but Sid had starved to death here at home. So to rectify that and prevent any more of my creatures starving, I built and filled up a feeding trough. An enhanced Voidworm then decided now was a good time to visit, but I wasn't feeling up for any company, so Angel and I swiftly showed it to the door. Which door, you may ask? Death's door. And that's when we headed back out to continue trying to infiltrate the lab. Returning to the lab, I attempted to slide behind the vault only to get blasted back to the respawn screen. So respawning, I repaired my gear and set some C4 to craft. And along the way back to the lab, I was picked off of Angel by a 250 when I accidentally tossed out pudding. I accidentally threw out my tappy. No, I can't lose that. So I frantically whistled it to flee so I wouldn't die, but as I took out the 079s attacking, and as I was flying away, a 682 popped up and killed pudding. So with no flyer, I made my way back to the lab and grappled up to it, and hiding behind the chem bench, I started shooting rockets at the generator, running through both of my launcher's durability, so I tossed out Pocket Rocket to soak, but the ensuing blast from the turret sent me back home. Upon respawning, I made up some cementing paste to repair my launchers, and after waiting for a bit, I then repaired them. So setting back out to the lab, I grappled up, avoided the turret's line of sight, and collected the loot from the vault I had destroyed. A full set of tech armor, not that I could use it as I didn't have any tech grams yet, a tech bow, and some grenades. Not a bad haul, and hiding from the view of the turrets, I continued launching rockets into the generator until finally it was destroyed. Now that I was safe from turret fire, I read the journal I had picked up. Working on a way find his weakness of its own. SCP-999 looks like a pumpkin chili pretty much. We don't know why and how, but maybe this may be our one and only chance against it. SCP-001's current location is above the lab you're currently residing in. Oh, well that does explain, I guess, why there is so much this area. Closing up the journal, I proceeded to loot the lab of all of its goodies as hell. I'd earned it. Leaving the lab, I spawned in the tank I'd collected and testing it out by driving back towards base only to vacate it once I got overwhelmed by a multitude of SCPs attacking. Hopping on Angel to escape, I made it back home, so checking what I needed in order to craft another 610. I was short on some flesh that hates, so instead I restocked my trank arrows and headed out. Time to go find a truly powerful SCP. Time to go tame the unkillable. It took a while of searching, but eventually I spotted it. The mighty 682. Only dying a couple of times trying to knock it out, I finally had it asleep, but before I could feed it anything, I had to go farm for some prime meat. So after killing off a few corrupted creatures, I rushed back to shove my meat into the whale, and after it tamed up, I tested it out, then flying around the wastelands until I saw my real target. Shooting a few arrows into the skeletal croc and seeing what it was fighting, I decided to leave it be. Not far away, I found another 682 and began knocking it out. Dying to the 682's little minions after knocking it out, I eventually respawned and heading over to the sleeping giant, tossing out my tamed 682. I named it Dundee and flew up to the sleeping whale, shoved some meat into its inventory and waited for it to tame up. Boiling it, I headed home, stopping when I found another 999, and knowing I would now need a whole bunch of them, I began taming it. While waiting for it to get hungry, I had to lure a 173 away, but after a bit of skillful parachuting, I was able to tame the 999. And then on the way home, I spotted a new flying SCP, SCP-659. Leaving it behind, I made it to base, only to see a 2317K chilling right outside my gate. So popping into my base as I started seeing damage numbers. So I tossed out one of my 682s and then immediately went to defend the base while I ran and balled up all who I could. I was able to save everyone except for Earthworm, who sacrificed herself in order for the rest of us to live. Tossing out Dundee, I hopped on and began fighting the 2317. Spending days fighting and dying over and over to its stupid fiery boulder attack. Oh, that hit me every time. What the f? But I kept chomping and chomping. It was a battle of will. Chomping onto the big boulder golem time after time, sending in wave after wave of my little wyvern minions, only for them to get wiped instantly. But after days of battling, I was finally able to kill the beast. Ooh, that took four. After harvesting the corpse, I returned home storing everything I had gathered, only to see that a meteor storm had started. Taking out a corrupted Rex chomping at my lower platform, I decided to just rest and wait out the rest of the meteor storm. Waking up after the meteor shower, well rested and ready to tackle my next task, I hopped onto Pocket Rocket and headed to the snow biome. Along the way, I found a lonely 999, and after taking out the aggressive dinos and a stubborn 939, I tamed it and named it Ticker. Placing Ticker on my shoulder, we continued into the snow and headed for the artifact cave. Running through the cave, taking out the polar bears and yetis that wanted to fight, I managed to make my way to the artifact, and collecting the artifact of the void, I headed to spawn in the Ice Titan. Wanting to fight it so I could unlock the tech replicator and mutator, since I knew I would need an army to take on the Scarlet King. And what's a better way at producing an army than breeding? Yay, my favorite. Teleporting into the Ice Titan fight, I tossed out my 682s and began the battle, only to be interrupted by a 2317. No, why is the 2317 coming and joining this fight? Having to stop the fight as I noticed my 682's health getting low. I parked it away from the action and continued chomping on the Titan with Dundee. Eventually I managed to get the final blow, unlocking the tech grabs that I wanted. Whistling for the injured 682 to follow, we flew over Pocket Rocket, having them both follow Dundee and I as we ran away from the 2317, not wanting to go through that long battle again. And then once enough distance was put between the giant golem with antlers and us, I balled up the 682's mounted Pocket Rocket and headed home. And then needing resources for the tech replicator, I headed out to go farm. Eventually finding an element vein, I started the defense only for yet another 2317 to show its ugly face. And as long as it wasn't mad at me, I was okay. So defending the vein, I managed to force the 2317 down the cliff. However, when I returned to the vein site, it was destroyed.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
So off I went on Angel until I found another vein to defend. And after a long and tedious mission, I had successfully completed the defense, allowing me to harvest all of the elements it stored, and leaving no part of the vein left behind. I managed to encumber myself with elements, dust and shard. So hopping on Angel, we went home, where I would then craft up the tech replicator and a couple of mutators. Making sure to also make a soul terminal to collect the babies, I set up my 682s on the flight deck to breed, and then planning to spend the rest of my time here breeding up a massive army to take on the Scarlet King. And then finally, I had my first baby. This was the start of my army. So I balled up the baby so I can raise up inside of its soul ball. And now that I had the mutators and whales breeding, in order to defeat the Scarlet King, I was going to need an army. I was going to need an army of 999s and an even bigger force of 682s to take him down. And after days of breeding, many babies hatched and raised until eventually I had the ultimate army of unkillable crocs and unkillable whales. Not only that, but I'd raised a horde of SCP 999s, all represented by a member of my Patreon, who continue to support me month after month and will support me in this fight as we go to take on the Scarlet King, mounting a 682 and then leading my army from the front as I flew into the arena. Okay. Charge! The battle raged for ages until finally it was done. The Scarlet King was no more and I had done it. I had saved the Zarg. I had successfully rebelled against the tyrant. And it was all thanks to you. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more of my crazy adventures, and go check out the nest if you want to see what me, Crow, and Chaotic decided to get into next. I'll see you all in our next adventure. Thank you again to Warthunder for sponsoring the video. Make sure you use my links in the video description for that bonus pack to get a vehicle decorator, some premium vehicles, and even some premium time. Here's a video for you to watch next.